Sam, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Jordy. Thanks for having me, man. How you doing?
Doing good, buddy. Thanks for being back. Whose practice field are we on this morning?
We got this really talented running back here in the Austin area. It's about 20 minutes outside of Austin. His name is Cam Cook. We're looking at schools like Texas and Penn State and TCU, and it's tough because it's still like track season here in Texas. But he got really far in track, but now he's back playing football. So I'm excited about that. And his little brother's pretty good at DB, and in recruiting, little brothers tend to be better than big brothers. So I got to get to know him now.
Sam Spiegelman does it, as you can tell, traveling the country, following the recruiting stories and bringing them to you at On3Recruiting. Make sure you're following them on Twitter to keep up with the latest. You created a buzz earlier this week when you had an interview with Arch Manning, who is perceived to be the number one quarterback in the country. The soundbite that jumped off was his about Athens, Georgia. We'll get to Georgia and where it fits in, but what was your biggest takeaway from your conversation with Manning?
I actually had a couple of takeaways because, to be honest, Jordy, in covering Arch, the biggest thing is you hear people speak for Arch or speak to people connected to the Manning family. You very rarely hear the words come directly from Arch. So anytime he speaks, it's very important to read between the lines, take what he says very seriously because he's very mature, he's very honest, and he's very forward. And he really isn't trying to trick anyone up. He's just being honest. So my biggest takeaway from being at Newman on Monday, Alabama is certainly in this race. The Mannings have never ruled any teams out. They've never, completely eliminated anyone with the exception of Clemson. So he openly talked about taking OVs and taking return visits to Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, and also opened the door for Florida and LSU. But Bill O'Brien, Pete Golding were there from start to finish at Newman on Monday. I don't think they're doing that if they're completely settled in the quarterback department. So I have a feeling that Alabama will not only get Manning for an OV, but they're going to be in this at least pretty close to the end, and that's what sources have since said since that visit. My second takeaway is that Arch is still very torn with this decision. Like I said, he's still going to take these OVs to try to separate these schools, and he's still looking at schools like Florida and LSU, which have new coaching staffs, which have connections to Arch and his family. It seems like that's been a theme developing for several months, and like Alabama, LSU was at their practice. I expect Florida to get there at some point this month to see him and try to get that visit set. And he said it. If I could commit, I would. And I think that was very strong because according to all people, close to or distant from the Mannings, he's the one who is still torn between, you name it, how many schools. So until he is 100% sure, we should not expect a decision.
Sam, who's the players in this recruitment? Who do you need to get to if you're a coach?
I think it's a combination, but I think it really is Arch. Arch is handling this. He's 18 years old, but he acts. It's something about the Manning family. It's something about the way they've raised this kid and all their kids. He's mature beyond his age. He's very cognizant of. Since he was a freshman, he talked about coaching changes and coordinator shifts and people moving teams. He's very, very savvy on this. So he's in no rush. He wants to make sure everything is in place before he makes a decision. He's leaning on his mom and dad, of course. I'm sure he speaks. I know he speaks to his uncles. He speaks to multiple people in his family and his friends. But ultimately, it's going to come down to Arch, and all these schools have an inner route to get to Arch, and he communicates with them as frequently as he does. It's about impressing him because mom and dad seem very content with any of these options, and they've said that on the record as well.
At Sam Spiegs on Twitter is where you can find our guy Sam Spiegelman checking in this morning, talking some recruiting. Obviously, he's got the last name. Obviously, he's got the stature. You recruit, you evaluate as many recruits in the country as anybody who covers this. Is he worthy of being the number one recruit, number one quarterback in the country, in your opinion?
Without question. You talk about talk about position importance. What's more important than quarterback? He's not an offensive tackle. He's not a pass rusher. He's a quarterback. He's 6'4", 220. I've gotten to see Arch throw quite a bit, on an annual basis since he was in the 8th grade. And over the last 2 or 3 times, including that I know they lost in the state semis to LCA, but Arch himself did not have a bad game. Arch was incredible. And every time I've seen him throw since, he's continued to take strides and look sharper. They were doing this drill where it was, basically one-on-ones, but they had a safety roaming over the top. and Arch is just dropping dimes in there. And he makes it look so routine. He is a football junkie, which reminds a ton of people, including myself, about his uncle Peyton. He's got a fun demeanor about him. I think it's all good upstairs. It's all good physically. I think he's a surefire number one, and we're going to see his name in 3 or 4 years in the first round of the NFL draft for sure.
Sammy, what do you read into him not taking part in the Elite 11?
It's just not really, I think, important to him or his family. That every event, recruiting-wise, would love to have Manning. They love to have him in the All-American games. They'd love to have him in the Elite 11. I just don't think I don't think he feels compelled that he has to prove his ranking or justify it, because he's never ever cared about his ranking. Honestly, it was more of a concern if he would be mad that he would be ranked number one. But he's taking it with stride. I don't think he cares about proving anything against the other quarterbacks in this class. I think the biggest thing for him is trying to get Newman to a state championship this season, and if he does that, he'll consider it a success, because probably his basketball state title is what he was buzzing about most when I got to catch up with him.
Wow. And he's gotten his size from his sophomores to his junior season was so exaggerated, and I think you saw it more on the basketball floor. He was such a presence underneath.
100%. I mean, when we started, you said it before, his last name is Manning. So when we first covered him his first spring going into Newman, he was about my height and about, 170, 180 pounds. And he is legit towering over me at this point at 6'4", maybe even 6'4.5". I don't know. At least 220. His legs are as thick as tree trunks. And he's got the arm strength where he's now, throwing it 40, 50 yards, doesn't even look like he's trying very hard. So things are really coming together for Arch from a physical standpoint. And yeah, when you watch someone from the 8th grade to their senior year, it's a lot of pressure, and we're always taking notice. And he's done everything, according to plan or exceeded expectations.
Brian Kelly, Joe Sloan, and Mike Denbrock seem to have made an impact on him in a short time. How does LSU stand in this, and where are they in the race, in your opinion?
Yeah, I was definitely taken aback. Now, we had heard after Brian Kelly was hired that there was I'll say this new LSU staff is in a way better position to at least contend for Arch compared to the last staff. Part of the reason why is Brian Kelly, who recruited Arch while he was at Notre Dame. They had Zoom calls when he was an underclassman. He was close to Kelly and Tommy Rees. Then LSU supplemented that by adding Joe Sloan and Frank Wilson. Obviously Joe Sloan is an offensive whiz, so close to being, Louisiana Tech's head coach a couple of months ago. And he's a big reason why LSU is all of a sudden, in a good spot with Arch, and at least his interest. And the same goes for Frank, who, Jordy, he's the godfather of Louisiana. Sure. He's got a great relationship with the Mannings, and he's going to give LSU their best shot. And him and Joe Sloan were both in practice on Monday, same amount of time as Alabama. Arch said it himself. Bo Bordelon is at LSU getting ready. His Bo's little brother Brett is now Arch's left tackle. I think Arch is interested in taking a visit and at least just kind of getting the feel, whether that's sometime this summer for a practice, whether that's for a game in Death Valley. It seemed to be the most genuine interest Arch has had in LSU in some time. I would still say that the Tigers are probably on the outside looking in compared to the Georgias, Alabamas, and Texases, which have kind of dug their feet in for just a little bit longer at this stage.
Under the radar, we've heard that Eli Holstein has had a really good summer. Where does he stand right now, Sam?
Yeah, Eli hasn't skipped a beat since winning a state championship after a perfect season at Zachary. And then I think he just recorded the highest Spark score ever for a quarterback at the Elite 11. He's going to be in the finals in June. Eli, since backing off Texas A&M, he's explored a lot of options, had a lot of conversations, but he's visited Alabama 3 times in a 6-week stretch. Him and Bill O'Brien have meshed really well. And I think Bill O'Brien and Pete Golding are also going to be at the Zachary spring game on Friday. So that's interesting that both Alabama's after both Holstein and Manning. I expect them to sign a quarterback from Louisiana. But it's not a done deal with Holstein yet either. Like Arch, if he was ready to make a decision, why would he not have come out and done it? He wanted to take a step back and also focus on spring, which will conclude later this week. But Alabama is certainly, it seems that they're the front runner. LSU has tried to get back into the race as they evaluate their options at quarterback. Stanford and Texas A&M are hanging around. Oregon's been hanging around, and even though Ohio State just got the commitment from the number one player in the country for 2024, Ryan Day was very quick to call Holstein a couple of weeks ago when he reopened his recruitment, so I wouldn't rule them out entirely yet either.
Sam Spiegelman joining us here from On3Recruiting. Real quick, Sam, we had Jaden Ausberry in studio a couple of weeks ago. Very impressive to sit down and talk to that young man. He grew up on LSU's campus with intense LSU ties. How do you see his recruiting forming and ultimately ending over the next couple of months?
Jayden is such not only an elite athlete and has been since he was a freshman at U-High, but talk about a kid who's got it all figured out, is going to be a superstar at the next level. Recruiting-wise, he's scheduled his first 3 OVs, all out of state, beginning in June. He's going to go see his brother Austin a few weeks after he moves in at Auburn. He's going to head to Notre Dame, and he's going to head to Michigan. He's going to save 2 OVs for during the season. I don't expect him to have a decision until at least, probably December, similar to Austin did a year ago. Until U-High is out of the running for a state title, I think he's going to focus on his team. And I think Alabama and LSU are the 2 favorites to get those in-state visits. Those fall visits. And I think similar to Arch, this new LSU staff, especially because of Frank Wilson and also the new DC Tom House, I think they have LSU in a better spot with Ausberry now than the previous staff. And right now, I would be surprised if he doesn't end up at LSU or Bama in the end.
Wow. LSU's number 1 quarterback on the board seems like it's Dante Moore. Do you agree with that? And where do they stand in Moore's recruitment?
I think they're definitely after him. It seems to be kind of a 2-team race between Notre Dame and LSU, and it's the former Notre Dame coach and the current Notre Dame coach. LSU has quietly been very confident with Moore for several months, and he was obviously at the spring game. But LSU again, they're still talking to Arch, they're still talking to Eli, they're still talking to Ricky Collins. They've been out west exploring some quarterbacks in that department. It's a unique year because I think compared to last year, there's 70 or 80% more quarterbacks in the top 10 still uncommitted. So there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall. I think it might start with Arch, so a lot of these other schools start making moves. But, I think more, you'd have to say I think LSU is waiting on him to make his decision. But they're gonna pounce pretty quickly, and they've got 4 or 5 other really, really good options behind them.
Last one, Sammy. NIL is right now in the center of a lot of discussion with college football coaches, players, recruits, administrators. You're on the front line of recruiting. How do you see it affecting this?
For Arch or in general?
Just in general.
Man, I tell you what, I have been doing this for a decent amount of time, and it loses a little bit of fun when you start talking about NIL deals and stuff.
I bet.
The cool thing, on the flip side is, if you're here in Texas or Louisiana and you hear about a kid that wants to go to USC or Washington and now their parents can get on planes and hotels and rental cars for free. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
At the same time, it loses a little bit of spark with how these decisions are made. You think about Jacoby Matthews, for instance, we'll see how that shapes out. I think there's going to be regulation in hand pretty soon because I think that, as a lowly recruiting analyst that no one really cares about, if I have some issues, these college coaches have issues. I think a lot of people in the NCAA are a little bit aware and understanding that, people are calling NIL, now it's legal. So that's not a good look for the NCAA. I don't think it's a great look for high school recruiting right now because that's also suffering from that because less schools are taking those 3 and borderline 3-star kids. So I expect some change coming in the next couple of months. I think it's just necessary at this stage.
What do you expect Arch to not demand? Because I don't know if money's the top line recruiting prerequisite for him, but I'd imagine somebody's going to throw a lot of cash at him. How much do you think he could get here?
I honestly have no idea, but I can assure you, it's just so crazy. I mean, I was talking to someone last night. He's not just the first family of Louisiana football, right? Because he's not the first family of SEC football, maybe the NFL. He's just like the first family of football. Right. How do you equate that to a number? Whatever. We've heard figures. I think the Athletic reported $8 million for a quarterback that's already been committed for a couple of months. So if that quarterback who, could be an athletic superstar and going to go to a blue blood program, what is Arch Manning worth? I mean, that's the face of your program for, the next, couple of decades if he has some success and wins a title. So, and then as a first round pick. So again, like you said, I don't think it's a major factor for the Mannings. They're not, in any need of financial assistance. But I think they are, cognizant of the opportunities. You have to remember his uncles have Omaha Productions. That could be an avenue for Arch one day. They host Monday Night Football every other week. You never know, but I'm sure that the number for Arch is going to be as high or higher than anyone else that we've seen from a high school recruit in some time.
National recruiting analyst for On3Recruits. Follow them on Twitter at On3Recruits. Sammy Spiegelman is on Twitter at Sam Spiegs. He's on IG at Sam Spiegs on 3, doing great work in covering recruiting. He's in Texas this morning. He was in New Orleans earlier this week. He's all over the country and bringing those stories to you at On3Recruiting. Thank you as always, man. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me, Jordy.